So I came here, I told my mother 3 months, and it's sort of 30 years now. So my calculations were pretty wrong.
Raphael, how did you end up in Asia?
I graduated in 2020, and this was when everything started going downhill in the world. So I was trying to apply for a lot of different jobs. All of a sudden, all of these different opportunities were just going away. But then I ended up finding an opportunity through sort of a provider that does, internships. And yeah, I decided to come, to Taiwan. It was just something that came up in my inbox actually. And yeah, from there, I think it was just a case of jumping at opportunities when they came up and then kind of moving forward from there. I wasn't really planning a whole lot. I think it worked out pretty well for me, I guess.
Actually, my path to Taiwan, if you like, is actually not that different.
Okay.
When I was at school, I studied French, Spanish and Latin, and when it came to time to think about going to university, I began to wonder whether I might look at something else. At that time I was very lucky because there was something called a student grant. So you didn't actually have to, you didn't have to take a loan, as the government supported you to study. I thought, well, if I can do that, why not go a little bit further afield than say France or Spain? So I think at that time, China suddenly came into the news because of Deng Xiaoping and the early reform. I thought, well, why not? Let's see about studying Chinese and see. As part of the courses, it was 1 year in China, so it would be fun just to go and see and experience it.
Where in China did you go?
I studied in Chengdu, and at that time, Chengdu, it wasn't really very open, and we were the first intake of foreign students there. There were only about 15 or 20 of us. Sichuan was one of the early market opening areas, so when we got there, Chengdu, one of the great things about it was the food.
Oh yeah.
Lots of small restaurants had opened up in the previous few years.
Spicy food as well.
Spicy food. There's a great deal of selection. So a lot of things were happening there. So it was a great place to go.
So from China, you came to Taiwan. How did that happen?
Well, I finished my year in China, and then I went back to London to finish off my degree. Pretty much as soon as I got back, it was like, okay, when am I going to go back to China?
Yeah, same.
And I found it kind of difficult to return to sort of normal life in the UK, whatever that meant. And I think I'd caught the travel bug. And so I looked at a number of different alternatives, and I got offered a scholarship by the Taiwan government and studied for 1 year at the Mandarin Training Center. No plans beyond that. So I came here, I told my mother 3 months, and it's sort of 30 years now. So my calculations were pretty wrong. So I studied in the Mandarin Training Center for about 1.5 years in the end. I'd studied Confucius, I studied Mencius and a lot of other texts, and it was really good fun.
Sure, yeah.
But at the same time, then economic reality had to hit sometimes. So then I met my wife, and then I had to find a job.
And so in terms of finding jobs in Taiwan as well, or just even in Asia in general, how did you go about that process from this kid on a scholarship to being the vice president?
I was very lucky in a sense. At that time, the PC industry was starting to grow very quickly in Taiwan, and there were quite a few opportunities in technical writing, these kind of things. So I got offered a position by a company called FIC, First International Computer, basically to come in and write technical documents and marketing materials. And at that time, I didn't really know anything at all about computers.
Okay.
And I still remember my interview, and Ernest, the VP, he sort of asked me the difference between the VL bus and the PCI bus.
Yeah.
And I was still thinking buses were red and they drove around London. And so I said, I'm sorry, I don't know. And he says, oh, good, you're hired. And so I was kind of lucky. And after I joined, there were 1 or 2 other foreigners there, so they helped me. But it was a very intense learning experience, learning about motherboards, learning about chipsets, learning about PCs. But it was also a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So I think Taiwan's always had these opportunities for foreigners who come here. Obviously, quite a few teach English. But I think in the tech industry in particular, there have been a lot of technical writing, these kind of jobs that you can create a career of. I mean, there's always traditionally been an expat route as well, and that's sort of different because then you're hired by the home country and sent here, but I've never really been part of that scene. One thing I've always enjoyed about living in Taiwan is that I feel part of it. You know, you come here, people are very friendly.
Yeah.
You find an apartment, get to meet some friends. There are job opportunities. So it's been a very nice lifestyle in that sense.
I think there's something about Taiwan there's always something new and interesting around the corner. Having lived in London for 4 years, even after the first 6 months, I was thinking like, oh wow, is this really all there is to it, you know?
Right.
And yeah, I think Taiwan is great in that sense just because there's a wide variety of things to do. I think the general sort of disposition of the people was very open and welcoming. And that's really great for people like us who go to, who come from say like the UK or from overseas, coming to a place where everything is so welcoming. I think it's really easy for a lot of people to sort of, settle in. But then I think what's interesting as well, you mentioned about all the job opportunities. How did you sort of carve out this route for yourself from, I guess going from a technical writer to, becoming, the vice president of marketing?
Wow, that's an interesting question.
Sure.
I think ultimately it was I made myself useful.
Okay.
And so certainly I remember the first few years, and you get big customers in, and I'd be staying in the office until very late putting together PowerPoint presentations.
Sure, yeah.
So I think I was very lucky in the sense I had good communication skills.
Okay.
And I had good PowerPoint skills.
Yeah.
And that was very, very valuable. That's somewhere I could add value to the company.
Yeah.
But I think it's also the company's culture as well.
Okay.
It's always been very open and has given opportunities to foreigners.
Okay, yeah.
And they do have a career path as well. So, I think there are some companies where basically you get pigeonholed as a manual writer or as a technical writer, and I've never felt pigeonholed.
Yeah.
I think also it helps in the sense that, business has changed a lot over the last 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
So there's always been a lot of opportunities to learn new things and stay fresh.
Sure, yeah.
And that's been very important.
Richard, how did your experience of living in Asia differ from your initial expectations?
Actually, I think because I was in China first, when I came to Taiwan, it was an upgrade at that time. And so I didn't have any great dreams about living in an amazing apartment or whatever. I think Taiwan sort of over-exceeded the initial expectations. I think the biggest shock actually was probably going to China. It was just more basic things like, for example, getting on a crowded train or a crowded bus, and these kind of things that I found difficult. Just the sheer volume of people.
Yeah.
You stand in a train station, you're trying to get a ticket, and there's thousands of people, some are trying to break into the queue, and all these kind of things. I think that was kind of a big shock to the system. But I think now I kind of get reverse shock. When I go back to the UK, one thing is the trains, how bad they are compared to Taiwan. Yeah. Even I think London Underground is great, but actually in terms of, I would say, in comfort, convenience, the Taipei MRT is much better. Okay, it's not as large, but it's a much better experience. So you go to Shanghai or Beijing as well, is that they're definitely on a par with London. In some parts of London, Underground feels quite old, if you like. One thing I find very interesting is 20, 30 years ago, I'd go to the US on a regular basis to see the future.
Sure.
That was where all the innovation was happening, as all the technology was happening, and Silicon Valley and whatever. But now, I think you have to come to Asia to see it. You look at sort of an overall trend as you talk about, for example, smart cities or dense urbanization. You already have that in places like Taiwan and China, and very, very well organized and very well managed. So I think also in terms of speed and innovation is I think Asia's caught up, and in many ways is sort of starting to outstrip Western countries.
Raphael, why should anyone come to Asia for work?
I think what Asia definitely has to offer is just this sense of, there's things that could potentially happen here tomorrow. You look at, the news that's coming out, say out of London. I mean, the lockdown is being slowly lifted, but 6 months, 12 months before when the first time I initially came to Taiwan, it was very much all this kind of like doom and gloom. And I think what's interesting, especially here in Taiwan, is we had a surge in cases recently, but we kind of dealt with that in a very effective way. And I think that gives me some hope for the future, in the sense that in spite of whatever's going on in the world, there's still this sense that in Asia, people are finding ways to get past these problems, and even beyond that, to sort of flourish, to do well, to have something that could potentially, I guess you could say, change the world tomorrow.
I would say that it's not just Asia. I think it's a good, in a career, it's very useful to spend at least 2 or 3 years away from your home base, if you like.
Sure.
When you travel somewhere, you pick up certain impressions, but it's only by working in a different country or city that you really sort of start to be able to dig deeper and get to meet people, get to know them better, and see how things really work.
Yeah.
I think it's also very useful to be able to work in a culture where English is not necessarily the first language, because I think it forces you to be a lot more open. It forces you to be a lot more tolerant. It forces you to listen to people's different perspectives than the ones you have. So in that sense, I think it's also very beneficial.
If you were in my position, or if you were in the position of someone who's watching this video who might be, in Europe, in the US, in America, what would you do to get to where you are now?
I don't think personally I would have done anything particularly differently. I mean, I'm very happy with the way things turned out. I've been very lucky. I really enjoy my job, and I enjoy my life here. I think I was advising people like you who are starting out is, first of all, don't be in such a hurry. Young people feel very, very pressured to launch their careers, be successful, make money, and I understand that. But at the same time, there's no need to rush into it. I think you've got to remain flexible, and you've got to try and find out what you really enjoy, or what interests you. Don't just go into accountancy because you think that being an accountant will be a very secure career. I think what you'll find more and more with technologies like AI, that probably will not be the case in any way. So take a little bit of time to kind of find out what you really enjoy. I mean, it took me quite a few years.
Okay.
I enjoyed studying Chinese, but then I also needed practical skills. I think my key benefit was actually I enjoyed writing. And whether it was about computers or anything else, that's what I enjoyed. So I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
I think additionally to that, it's become financially literate, particularly when you're looking at investment and stock market and whatever. Is keep up with the trends.
Okay.
And understand how that side of things works.
Yeah.
Because you're going to have to build up that nest egg. I think right now, actually, there's some amazing opportunities. If you look at what the big trends are in the next 10, 20 years, people may laugh right now about the metaverse and question it, but the point is it will happen. And you need to start thinking like an investor is like, well, okay, well, where does that, which companies perhaps should I be looking at, or which technologies should I be tracking? So you can build much more of a long-term view, because I don't think you can plan specifically where you're going with your career, and I think more and more you're probably going to be changing your jobs 3-4 times. Our chairman talks about we're all going to live to 100, and therefore, if you look at most people's trajectory, it will be maybe they'll have to learn a completely new profession every 20 years.
Yeah. But
there are sort of key mega trends that you can start watching, and when you're looking for your own financial security and growth, you should be devoting some time to that.